Okay,
Yeah.
I'm very glad to host this session for you, and I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Sin-Wang Chong, Assistant Professor at Queen's University, Belfast. He's going to present TESOLgraphics, opening up scholarly communication. So now let me hand over this to him.
Thank you very much, Chi, for the introduction. Let me just share my slides. Can everybody see it in full screen? The first slide, yes, okay,
yes.
Perfect. All right, thank you very much. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending the session. In this session, I'm going to share with you some updates and maybe to most of you an introduction to this very new project, very young project called TESOLgraphics. And you can see the subtitle is Opening Up Scholarly Communication. And for this particular presentation, what I mean by opening up, I'm talking about opening up the communication with people traditionally regarded as outside of academia, namely the practitioners. And by practitioners, I'm thinking about teachers, policymakers, administrators in schools, etc. So what I'm going to do in today's presentation is to kind of contextualize the project a little bit by talking about researcher practitioner relationship in TESOL or in language education in general, to kind of talk about the impetus for the project TESOLgraphics. And of course, I will introduce what the project is about and what are the reasons, what are the rationale for its existence. And then I will end the presentation by sharing some future directions. Hopefully I'll be able to cover everything in the first 40 minutes or 35 to 40 minutes, hopefully, and then I can reserve some time, maybe 5 minutes or so for Q&A. So I would like to, first of all, introduce all of you to our project team at TESOLgraphics. We are a growing and expanding team of professionals, of academics and practitioners, because one of the goals of TESOLgraphics, and it's something that we're quite proud of, is that we are a community, or we strive to develop and build a community of researchers and practitioners in TESOL or in language education in the future. So I started this project as a founder and a leader of the project, and currently our team has expanded quite a bit. So now we have Professor Masatoshi Sato, whom I'm sure a lot of you know, to be the co-leader of this project, and we have a number of research advisors. You can see Jim McKinney, Hayo Reinders, and Luke Plonsky. And we also have a number of researcher members and also practitioner members. We have 3 teachers, very experienced teachers. Mehdi is one of them. Mehdi has been teaching in Iran for over 10 years. And you can see Ming Sum on the right. She's a novice, a new EAP teacher. And also Jennifer Colwell down there, who's based in Sterling University, who's also very experienced in sessional EAP teachers. So we pride ourselves of being a community that listens to the voices of researchers and practitioners. But before we go into the project, I would like to, as I said, contextualize the project. Why is there a need for TESOLgraphics? And as Emma and colleagues said earlier, that there are a lot of already very well established, highly successful initiatives in the field of language teaching and learning and applied linguistics. Is there a place for projects such as TESOLgraphics? So I would like to talk a little bit about research-practice relationship. When we think about researchers and practitioners, obviously they are usually conceptualized as 2 very different groups of people because they do very different things. And sometimes people may not think of the need to communicate between 2 groups, because as you can see in this picture, that researchers are doing things that maybe to the practitioners that they don't really understand, or they think they understand. They're thinking researchers, of course, they sit in front of a computer, they write up the research report, whereas practitioners, they do something entirely different. So why is there such a need to communicate? And in fact, it's partially true, because for researchers, most of us are very concerned about theoretical developments, about concepts, about empirical evidence. Whereas for practitioners, of course, for teachers, their main concern is how do I teach the class well, for example, if you're a teacher. So they have very different concerns. So people think that why is there such a need for the two groups of people to communicate? But in fact, later on, as I argue that there is a real need and for researchers and practitioners to engage in more in-depth and two-way dialogues. So I would like to hone in a little bit to talk about researcher-practitioner relationship in language education. When we ask the question, what do teachers think about research? That's a very interesting question, and that's a question that has been answered in some of the recent publications focusing on research practice nexus. And this is one publication published in ELT Journal in 2017, talking about language teachers' perceptions of research. And this is a quote from one of the participants, I think, that the teacher participant said, the findings of academic research are bound to be no less misleading and unreliable than teachers' experience and intuitions. So it seems like this participant in particular is not very positive about academic research. They think that research can also be quite misleading, can also be quite unreliable. So for this particular practitioner, he or she felt that there is little value in reading research. Well, in a more recent study by Sato and Lowen in 2019, also published in ELT Journal, the group of teacher participants, I think they're based in Chile. So these teacher participants said that, well, some of them actually wanted to incorporate research findings in the classroom, but it's quite difficult because the teachers find it hard to really use the evidence from research to solve a very practical classroom issue. And also they don't really have, teachers don't really have a good understanding of the journal system. So what are good journals, for example? What are the right places to look for high quality research? So this is the perspective of language teachers towards research. Well, it's not all that negative, because in the same study, other teachers express that research is actually quite helpful and they care about research. Teachers want to read more about what researchers have to say about teaching and learning because that provided them with emotional support. And this emotional support came from the fact that when the practitioners' practice is verified or is supported by empirical evidence, they feel like they are doing something really helpful to the students. At the same time, teachers are pressured or they're expected to read research and to maybe even engage in research. So there is this whole line of action research or practitioner research going on in the field as well. However, in the same study, the teachers also expressed that they face a number of obstacles. They really want to have access to research, but they find it hard to find the time to read research because, as you know, a research paper, even a journal article, it's quite long. Usually it's around 7,000 words to 8,000 words, and some even longer if you're reading a research synthesis, for example. And there is a lack of institutional support. So their schools are asking them to read research papers, to conduct research, but without providing them with training, workshops, or access to the articles, for example. And there are quite limited teacher-researcher interactions in school settings. Even they're usually one-off, very superficial interaction. For example, a researcher giving a workshop, a one-off workshop on a topic, and that's it. So that's what they found in the study. Then how about researchers' perspective? Just now we looked at what teachers think of research and whether they want to engage more with research. And from the perspective of L2 researchers, researchers are also very eager to engage in dialogues with teachers. And here, Sato and Lowen actually said that researchers, or they as researchers, hope to widen the door and increase the amount of dialogue with practitioners. And I think that today's event verifies that, researchers, or at least the research community, it's very, very eager to engage in more conversations with people within academia, of course, about open scholarship, but possibly involving stakeholders outside of academia as well. And in fact, if we look at instructor second language acquisition, it's a whole subfield of SLA that is devoted to investigating interventions or practices of how L2, how language is acquired or learned in an instructional setting. So there is a lot of attention in research that practitioners need to be involved, and research findings need to be relevant to practitioners. And just to name a few journals, for example, TESOL Quarterly, they have sections that focus specifically on practices. So they have a practice issues section. So that section is dedicated to a practice-oriented issue or topic that has direct relevance to teachers, for example. The journal that I edit with Terry Lam and Haya Reinders, Innovation in Language Learning and Teaching, we have a dedicated section called Innovative Practice, encouraging practitioners to submit their own innovative practices with evaluation in it. So a lot has been done, and I'm sure there are a lot of other great initiatives out there as well. And I would like to ponder a little bit on the notion of open scholarship from the perspective of praxis, from the notion of praxis. Maybe some of you already know, but praxis is a term traditionally associated with critical theory. And what critical theory says is that human beings are agents, they are active beings, and we're not passively influenced by the things around us. We also actively shape and reshape the environments around us. And just an example, for example, in COVID is an environment that everybody is in, and we inescapably are or were affected by COVID. For example, lessons have to be moved online. So that's passive. But at the same time, teachers, researchers are working really hard to think of innovative ways to teach in a way that is that really helps learners in an online setting. So they have new platforms, new apps, or new strategies, new pedagogical approaches to ensure that online teaching and learning can be done in a very conducive way. So that's humans as active agents, because they are also actively changing and responding to the environments. And critical theory is underpinned by this notion of dialectical materialism, which focuses on the environments as well. So looking at phenomena, looking at environments as things or processes that do not exist in isolation, but they are processes that interact with each other as well. So for example, if we look at open scholarship, and it's not something that appears and progresses and evolves on its own, but it's influenced by different phenomena even outside of academia. For example, the readiness of practitioners to get involved in research or to read research. And ultimately, what I want to hone in, it's the notion of praxis. And praxis, it's a word that talks about the interaction between knowledge and action. And traditionally, when we think about knowledge and action, we're thinking about knowledge as something that is quite high up, and that researchers possessing the knowledge that somehow is only available to them impart knowledge to practitioners who will then act according to the knowledge. This is how we traditionally see the hierarchy or the relationship between researchers and practitioners. But the notion of praxis really talk about a two-way communication between researchers and practitioners. Of course, researchers have a lot to give to practitioners, but practitioners having their expertise and experience, really years of experience or even decades of experience in different classrooms, they also have something to give back to the research community. So I think what I really like about the notion of praxis, and especially to look at open scholarship from the perspective of praxis, is that praxis represents a unity of theory or research and practice, wherein these inform one another and they change together, going back to that dialectical materialism idea earlier. And I really like this quote from a book that is about language assessment, but I think it's very applicable to applied linguistics as a field in general, that researchers must partner with classroom practitioners, offering theoretical, methodological expertise and conceptual guidances. That's what we have been doing, and I'm sure we'll continue to do, but also learning from teachers in order to evaluate their frameworks and continue to revise them. So I think the ultimate question that I would like to ask, and I'm going to skip a few slides because everybody knows what open scholarship is, open science is, because Emma has already introduced it quite thoroughly. The question that I want to ask is, yes, we understand open scholarship, talking about, the research methods, the way we report findings, the way we reproduce findings, the way we evaluate the rigor of research and the incentives involved in rewarding open research. Where is the role of practitioners in all of these? So researchers are doing a lot of things, and there has been growing consensus about the benefits of open scholarship. I'm thinking about the role of practitioners, what they can also provide and give and contribute to academia from the perspective of open scholarship. This is a question that I have been thinking about a lot, coming from a teaching background. That got me thinking that researchers and practitioners, of course, they need to talk to each other. And then I think further, because if we're thinking about communications and dialogues, then dialogues imply a two-way communication. It's not only the researchers doing talking and then practitioners, you listen to me and you try this and try that because we have evidence to support that, but also practitioners having their own input in the process. And when I think about dialogues between researchers and practitioners, and think about dialogues in general, in order for dialogues to take place, effective dialogues to take place, there needs to be so to speak, a lingua franca between two parties. So it has to do with the language and how we, for example, as researchers, present findings. Are we presenting findings in a way, in language or words that can be understood by practitioners, for example? And both parties, of course, need to think about other parties' agenda and think about how to develop trust. I think that's an attitude. For example, one of the quotes that I shared with you earlier, showing that a teacher didn't really trust research findings. He or she felt that research is quite unreliable somehow. And of course, the two parties have to have a common goal, and the goal should be, driven by action. So there needs to be, something needs to be done. It should be more than just a slogan. So there are a lot of ways to promote research pedagogy dialogues, for sure. But what I was thinking about is, in particular, the role of research synthesis in facilitating research pedagogy dialogue. And I wrote a short piece in ELT Journal talking precisely that. And I think there is a lot of untapped potential of research synthesis as a research genre to offer to practitioners. I know we have been talking about research synthesis in applied linguistics, in particular meta-analysis. When people think about research synthesis, we think about, well, it's very useful for researchers, of course, because we know what's happening in the field, we know the future direction, it's very good for researchers. But then, is there value in research synthesis for practitioners? And this is something that I think not a lot of people think about. I'm not going to go into detail of what research synthesis is, but I'm going to kind of briefly talk about the umbrella term. So what I'm using here is it's secondary research. And by secondary research, we're talking, and when I say we, it's based on an article that is going to come out soon by Luke Plonsky and I in Applied Linguistics Review, where we presented a typology of secondary research in applied linguistics. And so in that piece, we use the term secondary research to refer to both traditional secondary research, for example, like narrative reviews, and also more systematic secondary research, for example, meta-analyses, qualitative research syntheses, for example. So I'm not going to go into detail each type because that's not the focus, but I just want to show you that, for secondary research, and there are different types of secondary research. I know meta-analysis It's very popular in applied linguistics. It has been here for a very long time, but I'm sure you also are aware of other kinds of secondary research like methodological synthesis, mixed review, scoping review, and more recently, I've been really promoting qualitative research synthesis in applied linguistics as well. So that's not the focus, but that's just a brief introduction about what I meant by secondary research. There are different types, both systematic and traditional. Now, going back to the more important and relevant question, why research synthesis and practitioners? What can research syntheses or secondary research offer to practitioners? Well, let me just show you this example. It's the content is not important here, but if you look at the abstract, this is a qualitative research synthesis. And if you look at the middle part of the abstract, it says that this synthesis will summarize qualitative findings from 16 studies published between 2002 and 2017. So the first advantage of introducing research synthesis to practitioner is that it saves their time, because when they read one research synthesis, they read a dozen. And in this case, since this is a qualitative research synthesis, we have 16. For other meta-analyses, for example, they can cover up to 100 or 90 something or 120. You know, that's what happens. And it covers a wide period of time. These studies are published from 2002 to 2017. So it covers over a decade of work on this particular topic. So it saves practitioners time. And this is another example, looking at the abstract, and this is, of course, a meta-analysis looking at 97 reports. So this to practitioners is good news, because they can get a big picture about the field, about the topic, should they be interested in maybe implementing something in the classrooms. Another advantage I see in research syntheses or secondary research is that they tend to use a lot of graphs, tables. So it's how data is being visualized in research syntheses that help practitioners understand the gist of the field. For example, using graphs to showcase the types of theoretical frameworks used in some studies. And this, to me, is a very good example, using tables. There are a lot of tables and graphs and figures in syntheses because there is a lot of information, obviously. This is a scoping review of research on digital game-based language learning published in Computers and Education, which is a very good journal. Maybe not an applied linguistic journal, but the topic is relevant. And you see that what the authors did here is to summarize the game genres, the language game genres that were investigated in different game-based language learning studies. And they provided definitions, provided relevant studies. And to the practitioners, this is very reader-friendly, because they may not have the time to refer to all the review studies, but they can look at the different types of games, different types of language games that they can use in their classroom. So this is very helpful to practitioners for sure. So that got me thinking whether there is a possibility for us to promote this particular genre of secondary research to practitioners, I mean, language teachers, for example, in a way that is accessible to them. And that got me thinking about the idea of using infographics. And that's when I started developing the idea of TESOLgraphics. So what do we do at TESOLgraphics is we aim to provide a one-page infographic summaries on secondary research in applied linguistics and TESOL. So we focus exclusively on secondary research for the reasons that I discussed above. Currently, we are only looking at TESOL. That means teaching English to speakers of other languages. In the future, there may be a chance for us to focus on L2 in general, or foreign language learning in general, but this is where we are current stage. So what we do is we aim to provide a one-page, visually attractive piece that summarizes a piece of secondary research that teachers can read in 5 minutes. And why this project, as I mentioned, it's really not just for creating something out of the blue, but really to harness the potential of data visualization, how we can visualize data in a way that could help practitioners understand it, and how to facilitate that research practice dialogues. I'm going to show you some examples of dialogues, and of course, promoting innovative language teaching and learning practices. I mean, being an editor of a journal that focuses on innovation, I think that's very, very important. Now, I'm very pleased to say with the collaborative effort, I think we are a very, very young project. I should say we started in November 2021, so it's nothing like Oasis or Iris, which are very successful and well established. We're very young, but I'm quite proud with the reception so far. So we set up a Twitter account in January 2022. We now have over 900 followers, almost 1,000. And I'm even more proud to say that nearly half of them, or more than half, they are practitioners. They're not just researchers. And we launched our website last year in November. We almost got 4,000 views, visits, I mean, to our site. So that's very, very impressive. And we got some really, really, I mean, glowing testimonies from researchers and practitioners. You can see professors commenting on our project, and ESOL teachers commenting on our project, and also professional organizations commenting on our initiative. So we're all very pleased to see this. And even more pleased is that we have recently been successful in the first round of judging of British Council's Elton's Awards, which is an international award for innovation in English language teaching. And we submitted to the Innovation and Teacher Resources category, and we were successful in the first rounds. So we're quite pleased to it. And currently, what we have done, in the past few months, is to produce infographics on a wide range of topics. And since we focus specifically on secondary research, we'll have a lot fewer entries than, for example, like Oasis. But currently, we are able to produce nearly 60 infographics on a wide range of topics, from assessment all the way to young learners, vocabulary instruction, and what have you. And so I'm going to show you an example of an infographic in just a moment. I know I only have a few more minutes, so I'm trying to do that very quickly. Maybe I'm not showing you the website, just the infographic here. So you can see that this is what our infographic looks like. So we have definition of terms. So we have key terms associated with the topic of the syntheses, and we have a question telling teachers what this synthesis is about, and we tell them how many articles were summarized in this article, in the synthesis, and we summarize the major findings. And more importantly is we have a box that says, how can I use the findings in my teaching? And I think this is something that sets us apart from other databases. And this is something we just started doing. It's not something huge, but the idea behind, I think I really like, is that the people summarizing the summaries, they are practitioners. As you can see in my earlier slide, that we have practitioners being part of our team, and Maddie, being one of the team members, helps summarize the secondary research. So you see that it's the practitioner's perspective that gets included in the summary, because in a synthesis, there must be a lot of good ideas, and we cannot just have everything on a page. So we have to select ideas. And then when practitioners are doing the selection, then it's interesting to see what practitioners want to know more, what practitioners think are important. And then finally, I asked the team, the practitioners who summarize the findings, to think about this question: how can I use the findings in my teaching? And these are bullet points, like principles, very general, nothing specific. It's not material, but it's a first step. And then we're also very excited to see that there are dialogues taking place on Twitter, because on Twitter, every Friday, we post an infographic with a link to the original article. And then you can see that people start to comment on it because they may have never read the original, but they read the infographics, the picture there. And then practitioners start to comment. And this practitioner commented, no grammar instructions, the best instruction. So that's what he got from the infographic. And that's dialogue involving practitioners. Of course, it's very informal dialogues. And this is another example. It's another publication in System talking about language teacher education. And you see that there are two people talking about the piece. For example, this Matthew Noble introduced an additional notion of creativity and reflection and shared an additional resource. And then other teachers jump in and look and comment on a specific idea, like in this case, it's the dictogloss idea. So you see that it starts with research, but the conversation was picked up by practitioners. And this is something we're really, really proud of. And I'm going to end in 2 minutes. I'm so sorry about that. So for future developments, of course, we aim to continue develop and expand the database. And we see this as a long-term, a sustainable project. At the same time, we're going to start phase number 2. And for phase number 2 is we are going to co-create teaching resources, lesson plans, materials with English teachers, EAP teachers, EFL teachers around the world to work with them really. So for example, the teachers could pick an infographic that they like, or the infographic topics is relevant to their context, and they develop a set of materials based on the infographic content, and the team would help them develop throughout the process. And then the teaching resources will be made available on our website alongside infographics. So you see that from research ideas to something a little bit more specific and concrete from the perspective of teachers. And one last future development that I would like to share is our new infographic format, because currently, to be honest, people have been saying these are great, but I myself, I'm not very happy with the infographics because there are still a lot of words there. It's not the best way. We haven't fully utilized infographic format. So we are exploring new formats that looks something like this. We didn't create this. This is from one of the recent publications by Oxford University Press, in which they illustrate a concept. For example, they're talking about the concept of learning spaces. And instead of giving a definition in words, they use a scenario, a situation to illustrate to readers what learning spaces are. There are formal learning spaces, non-formal, informal. So we're going towards the direction, but of course, practically it needs more, we need resources. And it's much, much more expensive to produce something like this by a graphic designer than asking them to pop some words to a background. So we're exploring options, but definitely we'll get there. So very excited about the developments of the project. And I just want to acknowledge the support from a number of universities that I'm affiliated with, Queen's University Belfast, University of St Andrews, and also ESRC, who have provided fundings at different stages of the project. So if you would like to stay in touch with us, or if you have any questions, I'm sure I eat into the Q&A time. But if you have questions, please scan the QR code and we will get back to you, or we can connect on Twitter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sin-Wang. Thank you, Sin-Wang. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. And I think you could just check the chat box if you would like to, and if you don't, maybe I could just read the questions for you. But
do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we still have about 12 minutes, and
oh, good. Okay.
Show gratitude to you, and yeah.
So do you want to read the questions for me?
Maybe if you would like to check it, I could.
Yeah. Okay, let me just have a look. Okay, so I think Elena asked about how can we get involved. Yes, we're always looking for project team members on a voluntary basis, of course. In particular, we're looking for practitioner members. So we currently have different categories of members, and not to put in hierarchy or whatever, but they have different roles. So we have researcher advisor, we have practitioner advisor. So the advisors are usually more senior, experienced people. So for example, if you're a school principal, or you are like a management in a management team in a school or something, or policymaker, you may want to contribute as a practitioner advisor, whereas we also have practitioner members and researcher members. So we would really look for members who come from a diverse background and not just researchers. And currently we're really looking for practitioners. So if you're interested, if you know your colleagues are interested, do just send an email to me, and I'm very happy to connect you with other members of the team, and we can have a Zoom meeting and talk about how you can get involved if you want. So I'm just popping my email there in the chat. So if you want to stay in touch, please do. And Ricky, thank you very much for your positive comment. Let's see. On using graphics to communicate research to practitioners, are you also finding it relevant to look at the work done by, often connect? Yeah, I don't know of this person's work, but thanks for suggesting. I'll be sure to check out his or her work. Quite a few popular books and websites have been introduced. Okay, that's good. So thanks for introducing the resources. I think it's good to, and it's important to actually look beyond TESOL, look beyond applied linguistics, look at what's happening in other fields. And I do know, at least on Twitter, there are people doing similar things using infographics, but in the field of education or research more generally. And they're doing it really well, producing really high quality infographics. So yeah, I'll be sure to check out those resources. Thank you very much, Ricky, for introducing those. Chi, I think I didn't miss any questions. Oh, is it Emma? Emma, you have your hand up? Yes.
Is that okay if I say my question?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that presentation. I really love these infographics. And I didn't type my question because it turned into a comment and then a question. So just briefly, at OASIS, we also summarize syntheses and secondary analyses. And so I've had a kind of worry about that, which I would like to hear your thoughts on. But first of all, Inga Alferink is going to be talking more about OASIS in just a moment. But one of the purposes behind them has been to promote reflection and discussion, rather than a top-down kind of, this is what this study says, absolutely not that. The idea has always been to kind of provide a stimulus for discussion and thinking. And I've seen that happen in my work with hundreds of teachers in NSELP, that over time, we haven't got hard data on this yet, but over time they seem to get confident, just as you were saying in your presentation about they get confident in critiquing and evaluating the research and the relevance of it to their own context. But what was particularly important was that the methodological details that are contained in the summaries about individual studies are really important for them to know about. So how many participants and the language of the participant, the proficiency of the participants, and that helped their professional identities to be able to have this confidence to comment on them. And from the other side, as editor of a journal which requires all authors to write summaries, I've seen how researchers writing these are likely to be get also benefiting. So I think that's another, you touched upon this as well, sort of the benefit for the researcher having to synthesize, having to summarize their findings. And I would really love to see some meta science on how researchers go through that process and what they think about the final product, and once they've condensed their findings. So my worry is that with syntheses, secondary research, it's already condensed lots and lots of research that is sometimes of mixed quality in of itself, and it's condensed that research into just one synthesis, which then a summary, which OASIS does as well, a summary condenses that even further. And I worry about overgeneralizations that are very powerful when they're put into a meta-analysis. Teachers use these synthesis, like you say, they hook onto them because there's so many studies that sit behind this meta-analysis. But as we know, the quality of some of those studies is not. So I just wonder what your thoughts are. Have you had any crises of confidence? Like I've been worrying about this. It conveys a very confident message. Here's a synthesis, here's the findings, is it really engaging teachers in that two-way dialogue that we're after, really helping their professional identity? Sorry, it was so long.
No, thank you very much, Emma, for your comments and question. I think that's I totally agree. And I mean, we actually in our project, we actually have a little disclaimer on the website saying, number one, we're not involved in the synthesis process. So we're reading the PDF like you do. So we're just summarizing from the PDF, the report itself. We're not involved in the process. And number two is, we make it quite clear that there are variations in standards. And I think like OASIS, we try to select publications in SSCI index journals. And of course, that doesn't guarantee, I mean, there could be variation, of course, but these are the mechanisms currently in place. But I think what it's more important, at least to TESOLgraphics being a teacher-fronted project, is that having that findings that's condensed or summarized finding is the first step towards verifying whether those findings are really valid, because even the studies, the synthesis or the studies being synthesized were conducted in a very high quality manner. Everything it's fine, it's methodologically sound, and it's positive findings. It doesn't mean it translates into positive practices in the practitioner's context. So what's more important from our perspective is that the practitioners try to do something with the findings. So for example, that's what we're trying to do in the second stage, is that they work together with us to kind of create materials based on the findings. And usually from the findings, they don't really get very specific ideas of how to, for example, how to best teach vocabulary. They have principles. And it's the practitioners need to use their knowledge and expertise to make the ideas concrete, make the ideas work, and translate them into materials. And I think that's an additional a layer of quality assurance, kind of, to make sure the findings summarized are relevant to the practitioners. But I agree with what you said. But this is something we're trying to do, in the future, and we'll see how it goes. We haven't started yet. We're still piloting phase 2. So I'll be sure to update you with this. And just forgot to mention, we're partnering with OASIS as well. Emma has very kindly agreed to take us in to be involved in certain way. And of course, we will continue to have other ways of connecting with OASIS, having our links of infographics under this summary. So yeah, thank you so much, Emma. I don't know whether that answers your, no, probably not, but.
No, it does. And I just posted a chat to everyone to say, we found that too, very much, that at NCEL, when we were working with the teachers at the National Centre, that was, they needed concrete representations of the ideas in the research. They wanted resources. They wanted resources to bring it to life for them. What does this mean for me in my classroom? And again, it's all about the intermediaries that operate between the research and the practitioners, that these people who are almost bidialectal, they can understand the research and they can talk to teachers. They're quite a rare breed, I think.
Thank you very much. Chi, I think I better shut up, I think, because it's
that's okay. Well, I think I really like your sharing your presentation. It's very clear and detailed. And for the participants, if you don't have time to ask the questions, or if you still have any questions about this field, just feel free to contact us. And now I think it's better for us to have a short break